Mister, how do you operate this Twitter thing or this Instagram thing or whatever the heck? You're supposed to know all this stuff. Anyway, welcome back to the show.
Later on, I'll talk a little bit about Brock Purdy and why he is still regarded as a system quarterback or a game manager. But for right now, I want y'all to help me welcome a very dear friend, a former Texas A&M Aggie, spent 11 years with the Miami Dolphins, and yes, I have that fight song in tow. And I had him on a few years ago, but never been able to reconnect because both of our schedules have gotten busy until now. Please help me welcome 7-time Pro Bowler Richmond Webb, and he joins right now. How are you, my friend? Great to have you.
Hey, Brian, how you doing? Good,
I'm
good to be
good,
back on
man.
your show, bro.
Hey, good to have you back. So football's right around the corner, right?
It's
And
here.
everybody, yes, it is here, and everybody's jumping up and down all over the place. Let's talk a little AFC football and your beloved Miami Dolphins. They just extended Tua, which I believe was a good move. They just have
Yeah.
to protect him now with an offensive line,
Yeah.
which was really beat up last year. Let's start there. How important is it going to be for the Dolphins to have an offensive line to protect what has now become a big investment for him in Tua Tagovailoa?
Yeah, I think that's the key with any franchise. You got the All Pro at left tackle, Teron Armstead, and Austin Jackson performed. I thought he at a Pro Bowl level. I was surprised he did make it to the Pro Bowl, but we had Robert Hunt got hurt. Um, we lost guys in the interior, and we had to play musical chairs. And I think we actually got one of the best offensive line coaches, Coach Barry. The job he did with what he had to work and maneuver and move guys around in different positions. Um, I thought he did a tremendous job last year because we had over a high number of injuries at the offensive line position, and that definitely affected us down toward the second half of the season and the stretch. So you're right. You got to have your offensive line, but it was great to get him signed early before the season started. You don't have to worry about long-term holdout, but now putting those big boys in front of him and let him go to work.
Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, other weapons that are housed in Miami. This is a speed demon kind of team that can run the football very well. Again, we go back to the offensive line and how big the line is going to be. How big is the health going to be for both Tyreek Hill and Raheem Mostert, which are two big pieces to this Dolphin offense?
Yeah, I think Tyree got nicked up a little bit. Mozart, I thought he, for the most part, stayed pretty well. But going back to the offensive line, if you're the running back and your offensive line is not as healthy and you're doing it affected our running game as well. So anytime you can attack people with the type of speed we have from running the football and throwing the football, it just makes it even tougher for a defense coordinator to try to game plan to say how he's going to stop. You can't just double this guy, that guy. And when you have an option where, Tua recognizes stuff and check out a one play into something else, it could be a nightmare for for a defense coordinator. So the thing is like you said at the start of the show, Brian, it's the offensive line and keeping those guys healthy. But I thought Moses had a good year last year, and I know he's looking forward to trying to better what he did last year than he did before. And Tyreek the same way. He's a competitor. He came in from Kansas City, Super Bowl champ. So that he helped set that mentality down there in Miami. And, a lot of people all the guys look up to Tyreek because he's probably one of the hardest workers, if not the hardest worker on the football team.
Talking about attitude, there's familiarity between Mike McDaniel and Raheem Mostert because, as everybody remembers, Raheem Mostert put up a record number of yards in an NFC Championship game, and that came against Green Bay in 2019 with San Francisco, and who was their OC at the time? Mike McDaniel. So the familiarity is there. We talked about health, but how big of a piece is a fellow like Raheem Mostert going to be with everybody? Let's just make the assumption that with everybody being healthy for this Miami Dolphin ball club.
I think you just put a big smile on Raheem Moses' face. And then we also have Devon Achane. That's a good changeup. Both guys are, fast. And I think Achan has bulked up a little bit more. So you can't just say we've got to stop Moser. You got to stop him, Achan. And I think that's the thing with Mike McDaniel. He doesn't just say, I got this. He utilizes all his weapons. I think you will probably see the tight end position implemented in some of the ways he attacked defenses this year as well. So he keeps adding to it. It's not like it's always evolving, changing, this and that. And I think that's just his mind. He never stops. He's always continuing to figure out what else he can add or how he can do something else to make it just harder on defenses.
7-time Pro Bowler Richmond Webb joining us here on the program, talking all things Miami Dolphins. They are trying very hard to get to the top of the AFC East. It seemed like last year, doesn't it seem like to you last year they had it in their hand before the 2 times they played Buffalo, and then something about Buffalo just spooked them because, and you've been through it before. I mean, shucks, Marino versus Kelly. Do I need to say anything else? You've had to go through it. They're going through it now. And it just seems like the Buffalo Bills have the Dolphins number, and it's been that way the last couple of years. What's it going to take for Miami to get over the hump and over the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, and I think it was actually, Brian, bigger than the Buffalo Bills. I mean, I think we had an opportunity to possibly finish second in the AFC if we play our cards right the second half of the season. But I think part of that was injuries. Part of that was, we didn't play at that level that we should have played, like we were in the first half of the season. So I think it's a growing process. But adding guys like Tyreek that's been in the fire to say, hey, this is where it gets important. And then once the playoffs start, you say, okay, now you take it one game at a time. But the better position you can be in before the playoff starts, it definitely helps. And I think mentally to have an opportunity to possibly be like the number 2 team in the AFC and then slide all the way down like they did, after a few losses, I think that can kind of mess with you. But you got to be able to put that out your mind and continue to go to work and say, hey, we are the same guys that did this before. We can do it again. We just got to get all this junk out of our head, refocus, and take it one game at a time. But I believe this year is going to be different. I think they have matured, but until you see it, the road still goes to Buffalo, unfortunately, because that's just a rivalry that's not going anywhere. And, everybody listens to the pregame. Everybody feels good now because the season hadn't started. Once the game start playing, you win here, lose here, this and that, and it starts to settle down, and guys will start saying, oh, they look like they're the real deal, or they might have an opportunity if they continue to play the way they're going to play. So I think everybody feels good. I think they have, if you look at them on paper, we have what it takes to possibly win the AFC East, but nobody's going to give it to us. And I think we got to have the mentality to say, we don't want you to give it to us. We're going to come and take it.
Another team that went through that kind of demoralizing slide was the Philadelphia Eagles, because they started 10-1 last year. It looked like they were world beaters, but then came week 13 against San Francisco, and they were beaten to a bloody pulp. And since that game, we have seen a team, well, in a word, crash. So how do they get back to the top of their mountain with the same challenges that the Dolphins face, with injuries along the line? Who's going to carry the football for them? I know they went out and got Saquon Barkley, but you played in the league you played in the league many years, and if your running back is oft injured, there's going to be a lot of problems. And Saquon Barkley for the second half of his career so far has been besieged by injuries. Now he gets a fresh start in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts gets a chance to redeem himself, but it's going to come down to the same parts that we talked about with your Dolphins that it's going to take for Philadelphia to bounce back as well.
Well, I think, and like you said, they're in the NFC. The good thing about the Eagles is they actually made it to the Super Bowl. They lost, not last year, but the year before. So that's definitely a bitter taste in the mouth. And I think last year was one of those years where maybe the year before you get those breaks or you pull out a win or this and that, the cards didn't fall that way for them last year. So it was bittersweet. And then what you got to do is, in a situation like that, you got to stay together and say, hey, we know the process works, but don't start pointing fingers, or don't start, this guy's fault, that guy's fault. They lost a huge leader, Jason Kelsey, in the locker room. He was offensive lineman, but I know he was tremendously well respected by all his teammates and this and that. And so when you lose a voice that big, somebody else has got to step up and kind of shoulder, whether it's one guy or a couple of guys, this and that. But I think they got a good core guys. I think they'll be okay. Saquon is closer to his old college stomping grounds. He's back in Pennsylvania. I'm sure that's good. And I think he's definitely going to be playing with an edge on the shoulder when he played the Giants, because they didn't want to give him that deal, and the Eagles did. So I would like to see him have good success, because you see the type of player he can be. It's just injuries have hindered him from finishing out the season. But yeah, he can be a special player in this league.
Who is the key, going back to your Dolphins, who do you think is the key, one on offense and one on defense, that can really spur this team along and help bring them to the top of the AFC East?
Well, offense is it's easy. I would probably say Tua. He's a quarterback. It's going to be his job to get the ball facilitated to where it needs to go, this and that. So I think him and Coach McDaniel has a real good relationship, and they're on the same page. On defense, probably pick. I'm going to pick Jalen Ramsey. I think he's a guy that's very special, that can play. He might line up at corner 1 minute, safety the next, but he's that guy that he always makes that. He's just got that big play ability, and one of the best corners, safeties in the game, however you want to label him. But for a guy to be able to interchange and still be that effective and play at a high level at two different positions, because it is the same, but it's not the same. And to be able to move around like that, put him in the best position to make the plays he's going to play. Those are the two guys that come to my mind right off the top. So, yeah.
A player that was interchangeable at corner and at safety. The first one for me that showed that was Ronnie Lott, legendary, the legendary Ronnie Lott, because San Francisco lost a couple of safeties in the free agent shuffle. So they moved. So Bill Walsh and George Seifert, remember George Seifert was the defensive coordinator at the time for San Francisco before he ascended to head coach, made one little switch and moved Ronnie Lott to safety, and Willie Flipper Anderson in that NFC championship game has had nightmares since then. It's different playing both positions. You and I have been around the game a very long time. Two different aspects. You as a player, me as an announcer and a journalist. It's very different playing safety than it is playing cornerback. You mentioned Jalen Ramsey with the smoothness that he has to be able to play both positions. But as I said, the first one that I saw do that and do it seamlessly was Ronnie Lott.
Yeah, and it was a different game back then. I mean, the way Lott used to punish guys. I mean, it was almost to the point that you wanted to tell a guy, man, don't call that play. Don't, because back then, if you came across the middle, you was gonna get hit whether you were gonna get the ball or not. So you
were gonna get black. Listen, Ronnie Lott, Darrell Green, Gary Fensick. I can go on and on and on with the old school players that you've been around and I've been around. You don't want to throw anything across the middle, especially against Ronnie Lott, because you're going to get hit. And 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have the football either.
Ronnie would knock himself out trying to knock you out. That's how hard he was trying to hit you. That wasn't right, bro. That wasn't right. Yeah, that wasn't right. That's a different level.
It wasn't. But it was, like I said, just the seamless way that he switched from corner to safety. And it was free safety at that. So he had to play across the middle against some of the best receivers back then. I can go down the line from Cliff Branch to, like I said, Willie Flipper Anderson. He faced Andre Reed a couple of times, James Lofton. I mean, he faced the best. And if you're going to play that seamlessly, you got to play against some of the best. And that's the challenge facing Jalen Ramsey this year.
Yeah. And I think Jalen looks forward to the challenge. No, regardless of who it is, if he could lock up with the best guy on a week-to-week basis, it doesn't phase him. So, I think the thing but what the defensive coordinator recognizes is that when you got a guy that can be so highly effective at two different positions, it makes it tough on the quarterback, and it makes it tough on the offense coordinator, because now you got to augment and possibly change some things, because you don't know if you line up in this formation, if he's going to stay at corner or they going to move him to safety or this and that. So it just gives you a few extra added things to think about, and he definitely will put some things on your mind. I'll just say it that way.
We got a couple minutes left. Who would be a good wild card for your Dolphins to see step up and help carry this team to the top of the division?
Oh, a player from the Dolphins?
A player from the Dolphins.
Man, we got so many players. I'll tell you this. I'm expecting a big year out of Jalen Waddle. I mean, I know he got his extension this year, but I've been watching that kid, that young man. He's a kid to me, but a young man. I ain't gonna disrespect him. Right. I've been watching that young man all through college, and I actually played with his cousin at Texas A&M. So, guys like that, from the time he came out of high school to Alabama, returning the punts, you could tell he's special. And, anytime you get the ball in his hands, he has that big play ability. So I'm rooting for him big time. That would be the guy. I mean, he's already that guy, but just come to mind right now, that's the guy I'm really rooting for to have a serious breakout year.
One of our dearest friends of the show and a dear friend of mine, Richmond Webb, 7-time Pro Bowler from the Dolphins, joining us here on the program. Always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. I hope you visit us throughout the season.
Hey, thanks, Brand, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/official SITM. We'll be back.